A young salesman walks into a department store buyer's office. He's carrying ties he made himself. Ties that are wider, bolder, more expensive than anything on the market. The buyer laughs at him. Nobody will buy these. They're too expensive, too different. The young man looks him in the eye and says, "I'm not selling ties. I'm selling a lifestyle, and people will pay for dreams." That salesman was Ralph Lifshitz from the Bronx. He had $50 in his pocket and a vision nobody believed in. Today, his name is worth $10 billion, and he changed fashion forever by doing one radical thing, making luxury for everyone. 1. The dreamer from the Bronx. The Bronx, New York, 1939. Ralph Lifshitz was born to Jewish immigrants who fled Belarus. His parents painted houses. They lived in a tiny apartment with 4 kids. They weren't poor, but they weren't comfortable either. They were working class. But young Ralph? He didn't see himself as working class. He saw something different when he looked in the mirror. He saw someone who belonged in those movies, in those magazines, in that world of elegance and wealth. His brothers made fun of him. "You're a painter's son from the Bronx. Stop pretending." But Ralph wasn't pretending, he was becoming. At 16, he changed his name. Lifshitz became Lauren. Not because he was ashamed, but because he understood something crucial. You can choose who you become. Ralph worked as a stock boy, then selling ties at Brooks Brothers, then in the army. Every day he watched rich men, how they dressed, how they moved, how they carried themselves. He was studying, learning, absorbing, and he noticed something that would change his life. Rich people weren't dressing for fashion. They were dressing for a feeling. The feeling of confidence, of belonging, of being part of something exclusive. And Ralph asked himself one question that nobody else was asking. What if that feeling wasn't just for the rich? 2. The $50 Gamble, 1967. Ralph was 28 years old. He was selling ties for a manufacturer, making decent money, safe job. But safe wasn't enough. Every day, he saw the same boring ties. Thin, conservative, made for men who wanted to blend in. Ralph didn't want to blend in. He wanted to stand out. So he borrowed $50, and he started making his own ties. But these weren't regular ties. They were wide, made from expensive fabrics, bold colors and patterns. Everyone told him he was crazy. Men don't want wide ties. They're too flashy, too expensive. Ralph didn't listen because he understood something about people. We don't just buy products, we buy who we want to be. He named his brand Polo, not because of the sport, but because Polo represented something. Old money, aristocracy, the American dream. He started selling his ties from a drawer in the Empire State Building. A single drawer, that's all he could afford. Department stores rejected him. Too expensive, nobody will buy them. But then something magical happened. Bloomingdale's gave him a chance. Not a big order, just a test. Those ties sold out in days. Not because they were better ties, but because Ralph was selling something deeper. He was selling the idea of success. 3. The philosophy. This is where Ralph's genius emerged. And this is where his famous philosophy came from. Fashion designers at the time were creating for the elite, for runway models, for society ladies, for people who could afford $10,000 dresses. Ralph said something revolutionary. "I don't design clothes for the queen, I design them for the people." But here's the brilliant part. He didn't make his clothes cheap. He made them aspirational. A Ralph Lauren polo shirt cost more than a regular shirt, but less than true luxury. It was expensive enough to feel special, but affordable enough that a middle-class person could save up and buy it. He created what nobody had created before, accessible luxury. You didn't need to be born rich to look rich. You didn't need a trust fund to feel successful. You just needed to believe in the dream Ralph was selling. And what was that dream? The American dream. Cowboys, prep schools, country clubs, safari adventures, old Hollywood glamour. Ralph was selling an identity, a story, a version of yourself that you aspired to be. 4. The empire. By the 1970s, Ralph Lauren wasn't just a tie brand, it was a lifestyle. He designed costumes for The Great Gatsby movie. Suddenly, everyone wanted to look like old money. He opened stores that didn't feel like stores. They felt like mansions, like you were walking into the home of someone wealthy and successful. He expanded beyond ties. Shirts, suits, dresses, perfume, home goods, everything. But here's what made Ralph different from other fashion empires. He never lost sight of his philosophy. While other designers got more exclusive, more expensive, more elite, Ralph stayed committed to his vision. Luxury for the people. A teenager saving up for months could buy a polo shirt and feel like they belonged to something. A middle-class family could buy Ralph Lauren sheets and feel like they were living in luxury. He democratized aspiration. Critics called him a sellout. Real luxury is exclusive. You're making it too accessible. But Ralph understood something they didn't. The biggest market isn't the rich. It's everyone who wants to be. 5. The legacy today, Ralph Lauren is worth over $10 billion. His brand generates over $6 billion in revenue every year. But here's what makes his story special. Ralph never forgot where he came from. He's still that kid from the Bronx who dreamed bigger than his circumstances. He still designs clothes for the feeling they create, not just the fashion. He still believes that style isn't about money, it's about vision. At 85 years old, Ralph still comes to work, still designs, still obsesses over every detail. Because for Ralph, this was never just about building a business. It was about proving something. Proving that a painter's son from the Bronx could create a global empire. Proving that luxury doesn't belong to the elite. It belongs to anyone with dreams. Proving that you don't need to be born into wealth to create wealth. The lesson. So what do we learn from Ralph Lauren? Here's the truth. Most people see a gap between rich and poor and they accept it. That's just how it is. Ralph saw that gap and asked, what if I could build a bridge? He didn't try to make cheap products for poor people. That's not inspiring. He made aspirational products for dreaming people. There's a massive difference. Cheap says, you can't afford better. Aspirational says, you deserve better, and here's how to get it. Ralph understood that people don't just want products. They want transformation. They want to look in the mirror and see the person they're becoming, not the person they are today. And he built a $10 billion empire by believing in people's dreams. The fashion industry told him, luxury must be exclusive. Ralph said, no, dreams should be accessible. The fashion industry said, design for the elite. Ralph said, I design for the dreamer. The fashion industry said, you're from the Bronx. You don't belong here. Ralph said, watch me build my own belonging. And that's the lesson. You don't need permission to dream big. You don't need a fancy background to create something beautiful. You just need vision and the courage to build a bridge between where people are and where they want to be. Ralph Lauren started with $50 in his pocket and ties in a drawer. Today, millions of people around the world wear his logo. Not because it's the best quality, not because it's the cheapest, but because when they put it on, they feel like the person they aspire to be. That's not fashion, that's magic. That's not marketing, that's belief. And that's not just business, that's the American dream. A kid from the Bronx who proved that luxury isn't about who can afford it, it's about who can dream it.